Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. I got another build guide for you guys. This is an update to the hardcore GOLEMANCER that I played in preseason in Diablo 4. Now we have Season 1, we have a few extra bells and whistles. There have been a lot of changes from preseason, but I feel like they have gradually refined the minion archetype for Necromancer to a point where it's a really good build. A lot of the time when people talk about minion builds in Diablo 4, they're talking about men-down builds using infinity lucky hit bugs with Bone Prison. This won't always be the case, and those characters are vastly different in the actual build and the gameplay of that type of build. So, if you want to be a true minion player, this is the build that I'm going to recommend for hardcore. I know a lot of you guys mid-season, you kind of want to play another character, but you feel like you've done it all. The truth is that hardcore in Diablo 4 is done in a pretty fair way. Once you get to tier 3, let's say, you start getting the required materials for your cheat death potions fairly regularly to a point where you can usually have them up. If you die in hardcore after that point, it's probably your fault, but a fair environment for hardcore in an ARPG is a rare thing. I haven't seen it in many years, so that's why I decided to give that playthrough in the preseason. I had a lot of fun, and I have tailored the build even further to what I think is possibly the very best hardcore build in the game. In this build, you will probably not die even if your computer crashes, even if their server crashes. Your character will probably not die being in the game for like 5 minutes, okay? Longer even. It's almost an auto battler build. So let's get into it here. In terms of the skill setup, it is exactly the same as I had it in the preseason character. If you want to see that character in action, you guys can check out the hardcore journey. It's going to be playing very similarly even now with the changes and a few extra, gems there. To recap, we are using Bone Storm because we have a lot of defensive properties off of it. We're using Blood Mist. Truth is, we're not really using Blood Mist, but because you're playing hardcore, you need to have an emergency button. If things don't go your way, you want to get out of there. You need to get out of CC. You're going to need a button to do that, and for a Necromancer, unfortunately, this is the only button to do that. Raise Skeleton is going to be the mages and the warriors. Corpse Tendrils we're going to be casting manually. Decrepify we're going to be casting manually. And for the Golem, like the Golemancer, we're using the Bone Golem. The Bone Golem is the best for a pure minion build because one of the best ways to scale the damage of your minions is attack speed, and the Bone Golem, unlike the other two Golem, has an area of effect auto attack. It's kind of like a cleave. So the more you scale all of your other minions, the more area of effect you get from your Golem. And this specific build, I consider it a Golemancer build because all of your area of effect damage is coming from the Bone Golem. And that is really neat, I think. We're using the Shed a Corpse in the original build. I used the other one. It seems like the Golem sheds corpses pretty frequently, even when he doesn't take anything close to 20% of its life and damage. Possibly it works off of base life, possibly it's bugged. I'm not too sure. I'm going to go over some of the general aspects of this character, but if you do want to see the guide in its entirety, make sure to check out the Mobalytics written guide in the link in the description of the video. Now, just quickly going over some of the aspects, we're obviously using Shielding Storm, which gives us a barrier. This was buffed. All barrier generations that are a percentage of health now work off of your maximum life, so this is stronger than recently, as you might remember it. The armor aspect is mandatory. The Shadow Bone Storm lets it hit 3 times more often, and it's also going to contribute a little bit extra AoE damage, which we do want because we're relying on the Golem entirely, and the Golem, well, that is a pretty big part of it because we're a Golemancer. We want the immunity bubble. This is almost never going to proc except for when you encounter a cold enchanted where you and all your minions are stacked together. The cold enchanted mob does like an AoE cold blast for every target in a narrow area. So this will actually stop you from getting cascade one-shot. It probably wouldn't even one-shot you because the character is so defensive, but it's hardcore. You want to play it safe. 2 warriors on the boots, attack speed on the weapon. Sources of attack speed really don't work for minions. The in-game tooltip says that 30% of your character's attack speed becomes minion attack speed. That's not true. It might become minion attack speed, but minion attack speed, unless it specifies a specific minion, only 30% of that works. If you want full value attack speed, it has to specify a minion, like the golem attack speed on the Paragon tree that we do get, or literally this one aspect. Mages on the amulet, I really like this. Skeleton aspect reanimation was buffed from 30 to 40, and conceded. If you have a barrier, you get increased damage. We're going to have a barrier almost all the time because Shielding Storm is 10 seconds barrier. So even if you don't have Bone Storm, it's going to be 10 seconds later that you still have some barrier. And your Bone Storm 10-second duration actually becomes 12-second duration for damage because we have 2 seconds damage over time. So it's really like a 22-second window that you have to bridge the gap with Decrepify procs. Now, as you've seen the skill setup, the only thing that we use that actually takes essence is Decrepify. We are using the cold mages to gain essence. This effectively means that you have infinite essence. There's no way that you can possibly spend the essence that you generate from these cold mages. Some players like the vulnerable, but I don't think it's really that important or necessary. There is a case for using the shadow mages. The shadow mages do a lot more damage even with this build, but in my opinion, the build is fantastic even with the cold mages that do less damage than the frost mages. But what the cold mages also do is they chill and freeze everything. If you disconnect, everything will be frozen. You can just stay in place. You don't have to worry about it. Also, for disconnect protection, we have automatic corpse generations from skills. Now, this thing is only really going to proc off of your corpse tendrils, but you get 1 free corpse tendrils every 6 seconds. With a 3-second stun and your mage is chilling and freezing everything in between, this is going to make it so you basically can't die even if you take your hands off your keyboard at almost every single point in the game. We're using Revenge, we're not using the Curse Aura because the gameplay style for this build is going to be different. We don't actually want to be close to the action. We want to be further back. We want to send our minions in by hard casting Decrepify. So because we don't want to use the Decrepify, we don't really want to be that close to the other monsters. That is an element of risk that's just not really worth taking. Revenge. Damage reduction. Why not? Barber adds a lot of extra AoE and is simply the best Malignant Heart to use, Wrathful Heart, I mean. There is one that gives you minion damage, but you can use that one for a while. You can probably counteract the drain from the cold mages anyway, but when you get a Barber, you definitely want to put that on. The gameplay loop is you want to send your golem in when you can. You want to use the taunt ability that the golem has. This was actually substantially buffed in Season 1 because your golem gets phasing, which means that he can walk through all enemies. He will never get stuck anymore. If you use the golem ability and point him to the middle of the room, the golem will always go there. They actually increase the movement speed of the golem as well. He'll taunt the entire room. The entire room will get close. You'll get a corpse tendrils automatically. You can hard cast another one a few seconds later. It is such a safe play style, and if you get the hang of it, it can be pretty fast as well. We use rubies instead of topazes, again, because we're hanging back. We're not really going to get crowd control to begin with, and if we do and it looks bad, we pop that blood mist. In terms of the skills, we don't use a basic skill. We don't use a core skill. 1 point in blood mist will do. All the standard I like to get a little bit of extra thorns in this because it's a little bit of extra AoE, but it's not super necessary. Death's Embrace for a little bit of damage reduction. Amplify damage was buffed. Decrepify just to get Abhorrent Decrepify. I thought of putting more points in Decrepify, but I've actually noticed that if the monsters are slowed like really significant, like if you get like 8-9 points in Decrepify, the monsters like barely move, which sounds good, but it actually makes it a lot harder to group them up properly, because even though you can group them up with the Golem Taunt and Corpse Tendrils pull-in effect, your minions kind of just do whatever sometimes, and that actually can separate the grouping. And if they're moving like too slow, they're not actually able to chase the target, so they start to spread out a little bit more. It's kind of part of the wonkiness and the magic of playing minions, honestly. 5 points Corpse Tendrils because we do want to be using it fairly often, and because we're not Shadow, we have pretty easy usage of points. We are getting Necrotic Carapace, free Fortify. You can get the Fortify damage reduction effect. It still applies, but if your barrier gets hit and not your life directly, your Fortify doesn't go down when you take damage. So super easy to keep up Fortify with this build. 3 points in Golem. All the minion passives, the Bone Storm, and Kalan's Edict. And again, Kalan's Edict requires a playstyle change. With this build, you want to hang back. In terms of Paragon, I haven't really changed much at all compared to the preseason character. While a lot of nodes were adjusted slightly, it didn't really affect the decision making. We put the Mage glyph there because the only way to get full effective damage for a minion that you use is to get the glyph for it. Dead Razor in Cult Leader with the point Super Standard. Here we use Control. There are a few extra int nodes if you want, and I do leave a few extra points for flexibility. We do get the Golem nodes, we get the rare Golem nodes, we get this Golem node. 17 Golem attack speed is a tremendous amount. Here we use the actual Golem node on the Scent of Death board. This is the highest willpower board. This will give you over 200% Golem damage, and you will notice that your Golem won't be hitting for millions, but your Golem's going to be attacking like 4 times a second for like 30,000. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's going to immediately clear all the crappy monsters, so the monsters that actually have significant health totals can start to take the significant single target damage of your skeleton mages. And exploit glyph here with a few other dexterity nodes if you choose to get them, and Flesh Eater, of course. Overall, this is one of my prized builds because I think it is possibly the best introduction to hardcore for players that haven't played it before. And honestly, D4 being what it is right now, it might be the adventure you're looking for. So check out the build, give it a try, and we'll see you next time.